Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us as we walk through another tasting of our wine club shipment. I'm here with my wonderful wife, Ashley Parker Snider, and our head winemaker, Blair Fox. My name's Tim Snider, and we're going to take a little bit of time to walk you through what you hopefully have just received, or if not, will receive imminently. I should note that we are, this is the first time that we're recording here in our newly redone production room. We'll ask Blair a little bit later to comment about our concrete fermentation program that we've just implemented and we're really excited about. But I think to begin, we have a really exciting new vintage release of the Parker Family Reserve White. This is a bit of a different take on this wine with a bit of a different varietal makeup. 100% from our Rodney's Vineyard, our estate ranch, but a lovely white blend. And maybe, Blair, I can ask you to tell us a little bit about this and the varietal makeup.
Sure. Thanks, Tim. This is all, like Tim said, all grown here on Rodney's Vineyard, and I believe this was the first vintage, right, Ashley?
I think so. You're the boss.
So we put Vermentino in the blend. So
I think it adds. I think it really adds to it. It's really crisp and delish.
It's a really bright, fresh style. No new wood on this. So you don't get any heavy spice or smoke or kind of your woody overtones. And actually, Vermentino is the dominating percentage at 37%, and then we have Grenache Blanc, Viognier, and then Marsanne, which is also tremendous wine from this vineyard. This is aged all in barrel for about 8 months. So again, it's got that really fresh style, not a lot of oak impact, but it still has some of that texture and mouthfeel that you'll get from a barrel fermented white wine.
It's really pretty. I think Viognier is becoming my favorite blending varietal. I know I love our Rodney's Vineyard Viognier in the Santa Barbara County, but as a blending component, I think it's really, adds a little class to everything.
A little palate weight, maybe some of those aromatic lift. For those of you that are recalling back to previous vintages of this, it had this particular white blend at different points in time had a little bit of Chardonnay and a little bit of Riesling. All grapes grown here on Rodney's Vineyard, but this vintage we chose to put it, make it dominated by actually completely Rhone varietals. And to me, candidly, I think it's a stronger wine. I think the Rhone varietals are really what shine best here on Rodney's Vineyard.
Is there a single vineyard white blend opportunity? Can we really market that?
Well, it's here.
I'm being facetious. It's just delicious. Honestly, you don't have to think about it too much. It's just really tasty.
Yeah. I think the nice thing about this too is the palate weight and the freshness and all what you're talking about, that pretty quality is going to be wonderful as the weather starts to warm up. This is definitely a wine that I could see enjoying on the patio with lighter fare, salads and fruit and or just by itself.
I could enjoy it out of a cooler on the beach by myself with a good book. So keep that in mind.
Yeah. Well, we hope you enjoy this wine when it arrives, or now with us if you have it chilled down and popped open. I think what we'll do now is move to the second wine, and this is really, I think, a wine that is near and dear to our hearts. It's from a fantastic old vineyard in Santa Rita Hills. We've had the opportunity to work with fruit from this ranch only for several vintages now, not too long, but it's quickly become, I think, a standout in our lineup. This is the Sanford and Benedict Chardonnay 2018 vintage.
Wow. Well done.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What I love about this vineyard in particular is it's planted to Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, of which we make both. And then the Chardonnay just hangs out there for this long period of time and just slowly ripens. And so I get to be out in the vineyard tasting these grapes and really picking the right time to bring it in. And typically it's around like that kind of textbook, like 23 and a half, 24 and a half, somewhere in between there. And it just creates wines with moderate alcohol, but there's just, again, there's like a minerality to it. You know, it has this freshness from Santa Rita Hills, which I think is really prone to developing in the area. It's 100% barrel fermented, and it's aged for about 10 months in 100% French oak. And about 1/3 of that oak is new. So again, with this wine, we're adding some of that new oak, spicy kind of spice box character. Nothing too impactful, but again, it helps with kind of that roundness and richness of mouthfeel, and then it adds a little bit of spice as background notes.
The finish on this wine is like really long. It's super pretty.
This really soaks up the oak,
Yeah.
doesn't it? I mean, when you say it's 1/3 new, I would not have guessed that. It's the fruit and that minerality that you talked about really shines through. The oak is really well integrated, which I like. I don't like a whole lot of oak on white wines.
Can I just ask a quick question? What kind of yields do you get on these older Chard?
Chardonnay still is like usually a pretty good yielding variety in general. And out there, they've done a number of different, the trellising is pretty old school. It's more sprawl-like, so they can actually get more yield, but still have really good vine balance, with the ratios of the vegetation to the fruit. And again, it's just a very well balanced vineyard.
Comes across. Really pretty.
It's a very elegant wine.
It's elegant, it's got low pH, it's got good acid, it's just like that real typical, bright, fresh Santa Rita Hills Chard.
Has this become your favorite?
It has, actually. It has surpassed other Chardonnays that you make, but it's definitely my favorite Chardonnay.
Yeah, well, this is really, I think, a special wine. I think 18 was a good vintage. We're going to ask Blair to talk about that vintage a little bit when we move into Pinot Noir specifically. But enjoy this one, and really kudos, because I think this is some of the best Chardonnay that maybe we've put out as a winery. So shall we move into red wine? And we'll start with, we have 2 Pinot Noirs, 2 different vintages. And the first one is a 2017. It's from a favorite vineyard of most of us, Ashley's, planted back in the late 90s by Eli and Fess, named after my wife right here.
Don't be disappointed. It's always a shock.
Lovely, lovely vineyard. The second Pinot Noir that we'll taste is a 2018 older barrels. And so maybe Blair, as we kind of get into these 2 wines, could you talk a little bit about vintage and the 2 different vintages? Because if I recall correctly, they're a little bit different.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, very different vintages. So 2017, we had a pretty large heat spike around Labor Day, which lasted for about 5 days, and we saw triple-digit, numbers even in the Santa Rita Hills.
Favorite occurrence during harvest.
Right, which is not my favorite thing to happen, and it resulted in wines that were kind of more upfront, fruity, didn't quite have what I feel like the structure and kind of longevity that the 18 vintage will have. 18 is probably my favorite, or one of my favorite for sure, Pinot Noir vintages in the history of Santa Barbara County. So I think it was just one of those really slow, moderate, things ripened, and I was able to be in the vineyard a lot and really kind of dial in when we were going to harvest, and it wasn't any logistical constraints. It was just bringing wines in and kind of at a leisurely pace, which is always more
You
Mo
appreciate
better.
that. Mo better.
Yeah.
Technical term, mo better.
17, not quite as leisurely.
Not leisurely. I think we
Yeah.
harvested all the grapes in, what was it, like I think it was a 2-week period. All the Pinot Noir, I should say.
As I recall that vintage coming down from the office every day, it was more. It was fast and furious.
Yeah, I tried to get it all off as quickly as we could. In 18, it stretched out over almost 3 times the length.
Yeah.
It was like a 5 to 6 week window of Pinot Noir. So much more leisurely and much more enjoyable, and we've got to take our time.
So which, just to not to dwell too much on the 18s while we're tasting a 17, but which came in last and why? I mean, as far as what got ripe first in the 18 vintage. Do you recall?
Well, 18 vintage, we're always starting with sparkling wine from Parker West. So outside of sparkling, and then Parker West are kind of some of the later grapes to come in terms of Pinot, still Pinot. So I think it was usually Ashley's is the first to come in. So I'm usually picking one block in Ashley's, and it's block T, and it's clone 114, and I'm usually picking that really early in the vintage because I like the way it tastes at that stage. It's 22, 23 bricks. So it's kind of lower sugar, lower alcohol. We don't do as much stem inclusion on that usually, so we're doing less whole cluster with that. And then as things get more and more ripe out there, usually like block W, Pomard clone or something like that is probably the most ripe out there. Okay. And then we do more whole cluster too, because it just seems to work better in balance with whole cluster and more ripening for us.
How much whole cluster on this 17 Ashley's?
It's about 25%. Yeah.
As it opens up in the glass, the whole cluster really starts to show itself aromatically. Maybe you can talk just a little bit about kind of what you'd be smelling, what you're going to be tasting in terms of, well, overall with the wine, but also with the whole cluster component.
Yeah, so this wine, I think you get a lot of like dark cherry fruit. I think you get some rose petal again. I think because of new oak in this, this Ashley's a 63% new French oak. Yeah. So you also get some of that new French oak barrel component, which again, you get that kind of spice rack character. You get cinnamon and nutmeg and vanilla and baking chocolate. I think you see some of that in this wine. And then I think with the whole cluster, you're getting some of that stemmy kind of savory character, which can almost be a slight herbaceousness, but I think it works really well with all that fruit character.
You just did it again, Blair. You said baking chocolate, and I could not put my finger on it until you said it, and that's exactly it. That, when you're a little kid and you find the baking chocolate in your mom's pantry and you're like, chocolate, and then you bite it and you're like, not chocolate. That's perfect.
I'll tell you the thing, just to finish on the 17, that is really, I think maybe it's a testament to Santa Rita Hills in general, and obviously what you and the team are doing with it. But you talking about it's a forward vintage, like you said. This wine, I think, as you taste it, the fruit is really leaping out of the glass at you. Those aromatics are leaping out at you, but it has acidity.
Oh yeah.
This wine is not lacking balance. It's not lacking backbone and structure. You guys were still able, in spite of Mother Nature throwing a heat spike at you and everything else, you were able to retain a lot of freshness and balance and acidity to the wine.
Definitely. And like you said, it's hard to really screw it up out there because it is such an ideal climate for Pinot Noir. And luckily it was only 5 days of an entire growing season, but it was just right at that critical point where it just caused basically sugars to go up, but acids still were retained, and so it does. And it has definitely a capability of aging. When I'm saying 17 is a more upfront and kind of drink now vintage. This wine has 5 to 10 years easily in front of it still.
Yeah.
So pretty.
Yeah. So let's move to the final line of this foursome. And we're getting into the 18 vintage, Blair's favorite, and the older barrel. For those of you who don't know the story, this was
Sorry.
The origins of this came from Ashley and I did a Pinot Noir event in Russian River. We were the interlopers from Santa Barbara County. People were loving a lot of our wines, and we had a chance to taste a lot of Pinot Noir from Northern California producers. Lovely Pinot Noir, Sonoma Coast and Russian River, etc. And we were tasting quite a few examples where there was no new oak being used in these. And we came back and we said, wouldn't it be interesting to essentially make Ashley's Pinot Noir with no new oak? Which that became older barrels.
To which I think Blair said, why?
Why? He liked Ashley's as is, and there's certainly a good reason for his argument as well. But we thought let's see what a different example of how this wine shows without any oak, and let the fruit and let the site really sing through. And I think you guys over the years, I mean, some of the older barrels that you've done are some of my personal favorites. I'm probably biased, but I certainly love them. And I got a chance to taste this wine a little bit earlier, and it is gorgeous.
Yeah,
well done.
Really pretty.
I mean, it's a great vintage. It's definitely Mother Nature helping me out with this one. I mean, you look at these colors in these wines, and this is Pinot Noir that I'm doing nothing to really help extract color from. I'm not using any kind of chemicals or ingredients that will do it. It's just good old-fashioned, winemaking with hand punch downs and
just sheer genius winemaking.
basket pressing. Just kind of old school technique, really, and just great fruit source,
Apologies, I am so sorry.
And this is, again, so it's just older wood that is considered neutral, really, as opposed to older. And, it's older and neutral. And then there's 5 different clones. So there's the Pomard clone, 777, 667, 115 clone, and then 114. And so they all kind of come together in both Ashley's and older barrel here, and show you what they do is kind of different clones blended together and giving you all those different little nuances.
I'll just tell you, when we have a chance to do like a Pinot symposium or a private tasting for people, and we put all the Pinot Noirs side by side, it's so fun to have this one without the oak element, just for comparison's sake, and it's just like always just a bright spot. And they're all gorgeous, but this is just different. It's just a little more pure. It's really pretty. Love it.
In 45 seconds, tell us about the concrete.
Okay. So actually, so these were here for the 2019 vintage, was the first vintage that we fermented in these. They basically were used for Syrah and Pinot Noir. A little bit of Grenache actually done in these as well. They're all hand punch downs. Concrete's like a new fad, but something that's been around for centuries that I work with in Australia and all over the world.
Again?
Yeah, old is cool. And
They use open top concrete fermenters in Australia, right?
Paraffin.
Yeah.
And then so these are all made in France, and I really like the conical style of these tanks, and they just seem to really be great fermenters for red wines.
So you think the shape of the fermenter is kind of like akin to like the right stemware for a wine? Do you think it does something?
Yeah, when choosing these tanks, it was definitely based on the shape of these tanks as well. So like they go all kinds of different tanks, like sizes, and more conical, less conical, straight up and down. So
very cool.
Yeah.
I think it looks like NASA or something.
Yeah.
I kind of like it.
It's definitely improved our aesthetic. Well, thank you for joining us. We hope that you enjoy these wines as much as we do. When we all get through the reopening, come back and see us. Hopefully that'll be sooner rather than later. And in the meantime, if you have any questions or you need anything, feel free to reach out, send us an email, reach out to Elena. But most importantly, enjoy the wines. Thanks so much.
Stay healthy.